it was for patients.
People, YouTubers, Instagrammers, etc. Achievement pornography.
Yesterday, I just looked and felt disabled.
All expenses paid, trip to Salford.
It's not easy being an amputee, not at all, but also it's not too bad.
While Dr. Neil Hopper spent his days cutting off other people's legs in the operating room, he spent his nights planning how to destroy his own. In September 2025, a 49-year-old British surgeon named Neil Hopper walked into a courtroom in Cornwall, England to face a judge. To the public, Neil was an absolute hero. He was a highly skilled medical doctor who had spent years performing hundreds of amputations to save lives. But Neil was not just famous for saving other people. He was famous because he had also lost his own legs to a terrible sudden illness, yet managed to return to the operating room on high-tech robotic legs. The newspapers called him the Bionic Surgeon. He was featured in inspiring TV documentaries. He won national awards. He even made the shortlist to become one of the first candidates in ECA's Parastronaut project. He was, by all accounts, a living legend. But as Neil stood before the judge that afternoon, his inspiring story revealed a dark and horrible secret.
This 49-year-old vascular surgeon was once named the bravest in Britain, but now Neil Hopper has pleaded guilty to 2 fraud charges.
Yes, you heard that right, dear friends. Neil had actually not lost his legs to a random tragic twist of fate. He had deliberately destroyed them himself. In April 2019, Neil went into his home, mixed together a freezing bucket of normal ice and dry ice, and held his feet in it for 8 agonizing hours. He froze his lower limbs so badly that they turned completely black and died. And while some of his colleagues argued that they could still save them, Hopper basically told them just to cut them all off. Why would a brilliant, successful surgeon do something so painful and extreme? The court revealed a dark double life. Neil was driven by a deep, secret sexual obsession with amputations and body modifications. He had spent decades performing surgeries on others while secretly dreaming of having his own legs cut off. But he also saw his self-mutilation as a giant golden ticket. By pretending he was the victim of a natural illness, Neil managed to steal almost £500,000 in insurance money. He used the stolen cash to buy a luxury camper van, build a giant hot tub in his garden, and upgrade his home, all while soaking up the praises of a fooled nation. But to understand why Neil Hopper traded everything to satisfy a bizarre fantasy and a massive wave of greed, we first have to understand the level of trust and power he held.
Born in March of 1976, Neil grew up in the Uplands area of Swansea, Wales, and he attended Llandovery College.
Neil Hopper was born on March 20, 1976. He grew up in the beautiful Welsh towns of Aberystwyth and Swansea. From a very young age, Neil was incredibly bright. He loved science, he loved how the human body worked, and he wanted to climb to the very top of the medical world. He went to a top-tier school, the University of Wales College of Medicine, qualifying as a medical doctor in the year 2000. But basic medicine was not enough for Neil. He was highly ambitious and went on to complete a doctorate in research in 2009. By 2013, Neil had earned one of the most prestigious jobs a doctor can get. He became a consultant vascular surgeon at the Royal Cornwall Hospital in Truro, England. Vascular surgeon. Sounds like a very fancy, complicated term, but we can explain it in a very simple way. Think of the human body as a big house, and blood vessels as the water pipes. These pipes carry warm, fresh red blood to every room in the house, your brain, your heart, your fingers, and your toes. If a pipe gets completely blocked up or broken, the blood stops flowing. Without blood, that part of your body has no oxygen. Just like a plant with no water, the tissue starts to die. It shrivels, turns black, and rots. In medicine, this tissue death is a major emergency. As a vascular surgeon, Neil's job was to be the master plumber of the human body. He had to unclog the pipes, patch up leaks, and restore the blood flow. but sometimes the pipes become too damaged to save. When, say, a patient's leg had turned completely black and dead, the rotting tissue would release deadly poisons into the bloodstream. If the doctor did not act fast, the patient would die. Neil was the man who had to perform amputations. He was the one who had to tell the terrified patients, to save your life, I must cut off your leg. Neil did this hundreds of times throughout his career. He was highly respected by his colleagues, loved by his patients, and lived a beautiful life with his wife, Rachel, and their young children. He had a highly paid career, a beautiful family, a gorgeous home in Cornwall, and the absolute trust of his community. No one had any idea that while Neil was busy cutting off other people's legs to save their lives, he was also secretly obsessing with the idea of having his own legs cut off. In April 2019, Neil's life took a sudden, dramatic turn, or at least that's what he wanted everyone to believe. This is the story Neil carefully crafted and told his family, his friends, his fellow doctors, and the local news. He said that he went on a lovely, peaceful camping trip in the woods with his family. While out in the wild, Neil said that both he and his young daughter caught a sudden, nasty stomach bug. His daughter got better quickly, but Neil did not. He claimed he started feeling incredibly weak, cold, and shaky, experiencing severe flu-like symptoms. Soon, things got much worse. Neil claimed his body went into sepsis.
When our immune system is healthy and working properly, it works to fight germs. Sepsis is a medical emergency that needs to be diagnosed and treated immediately.
Now, sepsis is a real and highly dangerous medical emergency. It happens when your body has a bad infection and your immune system, which is supposed to protect you, goes completely haywire. Instead of just fighting the bad germs, your body's defense system starts attacking your own healthy tissue and organs. Sepsis can cause your blood pressure to drop and stop blood from reaching your hands and feet. Without that warm blood, your fingers and toes will die and turn black. Neil claimed this is exactly what happened to him. He was rushed to his own hospital, the Royal Cornwall Hospital, where his colleagues were absolutely devastated to see their brilliant friend in such a terrible state. They tried everything they could to save his legs. They even sent him to Derriford Hospital in Plymouth, where he spent several weeks inside a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. This is a special, high-pressure metal tank filled with pure oxygen that helps damaged tissue heal. But it was no use. The damage was too severe. In May 2019, the medical team had to make the hard choice to perform a double below-the-knee amputation to save Neil's life. To the outside world, this was a heartbreaking tragedy. A great surgeon who spent his life amputating limbs had just lost his own. But Neil had a plan, and he was about to turn this tragic lie into a massive wave of fame and fortune. Most people would be completely crushed after losing both of their legs, but Neil Hopper showed a level of determination that left the entire country in awe. Just 6 months after his amputations, Neil did something that seemed like a flat-out miracle. He put on advanced, high-tech prosthetic legs and walked right back into the operating theater to perform surgery. He was back at work, saving lives while standing on robotic limbs. The media fell in love with his story. He was branded the Bionic Surgeon. In 2020, Neil was awarded the Amplifin Brave Britain Against All Odds Award, a highly prestigious title given to the most resilient people in the UK. He was everywhere. He did interviews for the BBC, spoke to major newspapers, and became a powerful voice, calling for the NHS to provide better emotional support for people who had lost their limbs. Neil loved the attention. He was highly charming and loved to make jokes about his situation. On his Instagram page, his bio read 12% robotic, 100% idiot. His LinkedIn profile described him as a somewhat legless vascular surgeon who was interested in gadgets, space, prosthetics, and 3D printing. He told the BBC, "My life is more interesting because of what has happened to me." But Neil's ambitions were not limited to the hospital. In February 2021, the European Space Agency announced a research for the world's very first Parastronaut an astronaut with a physical disability, specifically someone with a below-the-knee amputation. Neil fit the requirements perfectly. He had a medical doctorate, he had robotic legs, and he spoke Welsh fluently. He applied, and out of thousands of applicants from across Europe, Neil made it all the way to the final shortlist of candidates. In February 2023, the Welsh language TV channel S4C made a beautiful, moving documentary about his journey titled Steps to the Stairs in English. In the documentary, Neil joked that his wife thought he was completely crazy for wanting to go to space. Even though the space job eventually went to a British Paralympian named John McFall, Neil was still seen as a national treasure. He was proof that a physical disability could not stop a determined mind. But while the country was celebrating this brave, bionic hero, a team of police officers in London was busy uncovering a dark, underground network that would bring Neil's entire life crashing down. While Neil Hopper was enjoying his fame, detectives with the Metropolitan Police in London were investigating a highly disturbing illegal internet ring. The investigation was focused on a secret pay-to-view website called EunuchMaker. This website was run by a 46-year-old Norwegian man named Marius Gustavson, who lived in London. The details of this website are extremely graphic, so we'll describe them carefully. Gustavson was the leader of a dark underground cult of people who were completely obsessed with extreme body modifications. Subscribers would pay money to log on to his site and watch videos of real-life, non-medical procedures. These were not done by trained doctors in clean, safe hospitals. They were done in dirty hotel rooms, back apartments, and kitchens using normal household tools, kitchen knives, and veterinary tools. People paid to watch graphic videos of castrations, the removal of private parts, and even the deliberate freezing of arms and legs to force amputations. It was an incredibly dangerous operation that left many vulnerable men with permanent, life-changing injuries. The website was highly lucrative, earning Gustavson hundreds of thousands of pounds in profit. In May 2024, Marius Gustavson was arrested and sentenced to life in prison with an order to serve at least 22 years. But when the police raided Gustavson's home and seized his computers, phones, and hard drives, they began auditing his emails and chat logs. They wanted to see who had been paying to watch these horrific videos. They wanted to see who was active in this dark online world. That's when they found something that made their jaws drop. They discovered over 5,000 messages and emails exchanged between Marius Gustavson and a user based in Cornwall. When they traced the account, they found it belonged to Dr. Neil Hopper. Yes, the beloved, celebrated bionic surgeon who performed amputations for a living. The police discovered that Neil was not just a passive viewer. He had paid money to purchase and download 3 extremely graphic videos showing the mutilation and removal of male body parts. Even more shocking, the messages showed that Neil and Marius Gustavson had been planning a very specific project together. They had been discussing how Neil could destroy his own legs. The sepsis from a camping trip was a complete and total lie. Neil had used dry ice to freeze his feet on purpose, and Marius Gustavson was the man who gave him the instructions on how to do it. So what actually happened inside Neil Hopper's home in April 2019? By digging into his financial records and online messages, the police were able to piece together the exact timeline of events. On April 14, 2019, Neil used his PayPal account to make an online purchase of 20 kilograms of dry ice pellets.
Backside. We're just going to squirt this on the table here. Show that.
Whoa!
So you got a little bit of dry ice. Now this is terribly inefficient.
Don't try this at home.
Don't try it at home.
Now, if you've ever seen dry ice used to create a cool, spooky fog effect at a Halloween party, you know it's not like normal ice. Normal ice is made of frozen water, and it melts at 0 degrees Celsius. Dry ice is actually solid frozen carbon dioxide gas. It's incredibly cold, around minus 78 degrees Celsius. It's so cold that if you touch it with your bare skin for even a couple seconds, it will freeze your cells instantly. causing severe frostbite and permanent tissue damage. Neil Hopper knew this better than anyone. He was a highly trained vascular surgeon who fully understood the science of tissue death. He knew exactly how cold his feet needed to get and for how long to ensure they could never be saved by a doctor. On April 17, 2019, just 3 days after buying the dry ice, Neil went to his home. He got a large bucket, mixed together water, normal ice, and the super cold dry ice pellets, and put his feet and lower legs straight into the freezing mixture. Under the guidance of Marius Gustavson, Neil kept his legs submerged in that freezing mixture for 8 excruciating hours. Think about the sheer amount of pain he must have gone through. Even with his medical knowledge, holding your feet in -78-degree dry ice for 8 hours is an act of extreme, slow, and agonizing self-mutilation. But Neil was completely determined. By the time he finally pulled his legs out of the bucket, the damage was so severe. The blood vessels inside them had burst, the blood flow had stopped, and the tissue was unviable, a medical term that means completely dead and impossible to save. Only then did Neil call for help. When the paramedics arrived at his house, they were horrified by the severe cryogenic burns on his lower legs. But Neil was a master of medical deception. He was admitted to the hospital, where he lied to the emergency medical team. He used his advanced medical knowledge to convince his colleagues that what was happening to him were signs and symptoms of sepsis. He knew exactly what numbers, temperatures, and descriptions would set off the hospital's emergency alarms. He tricked his colleagues into prioritizing his care, making them think he was dying of a natural infection. His fellow doctors did exactly what they were trained to do. They rushed him to the operating table, and after weeks of trying to save his feet, they had to cut them off. Once the surgery was over and Neil finally woke up without his feet, he sent a secret, chilling text message to Marius Gustavson. "It feels so cool. No feet." At this point, you're probably asking yourself, why? Why would a wealthy, successful, respected doctor deliberately destroy his own healthy limbs? It's because he apparently has a very rare and very misunderstood medical condition.
So my left hand does not belong. Even a wind blowing on the hairs on the back of the hand pretty much stops me doing whatever I'm doing.
It's called body integrity dysphoria, or BID for short. Doctors also referred to it in the past as body integrity identity disorder, BIID, or xenomelia. See, your brain has a built-in hardwired map of your physical body. This map tells your brain exactly where your arms are, where your legs are, and how many fingers you have. It's the reason why you can close your eyes and still touch the tip of your nose with your finger. Your brain just knows where your body parts are. But in very rare cases, there's a glitch in the map. For people who suffer from body integrity dysphoria, their brain's internal map does not match their actual physical body. The brain's map might say you should only have one leg, but the person looks down and sees they have 2 perfectly healthy working legs. This mismatch causes a constant, intense, and deeply distressing feeling. Sufferers describe feeling over-complete. They feel like their healthy limb is a foreign object, like a heavy piece of wood strapped to their body that doesn't belong to them. This is not a psychotic delusion. However, the person knows the leg is physically theirs, but they feel a deep, lifelong discomfort with being able-bodied. The medical literature has recorded very few cases of this over the years. One famous historical example was the cricket historian Roland Bowen, who self-amputated his own healthy leg below the knee in 1968. In the late 1990s, a Scottish surgeon named Robert Smith performed elective amputations on 2 healthy, consenting patients who had BID, which sparked massive ethic debates and was eventually stopped by his hospital. During Neil's trial, his defense lawyer, Andrew Langdon, KC, argued that Neil had struggled with his profound body dysphoria since early childhood. Neil had spent his entire life viewing his own feet as an unwelcome extra, and a source of persisting, never-ending discomfort. For many sufferers, an amputation is not seen as self-destruction, but as a personal freedom, finally making their physical body match the map in their brain. But Neil's case went a step further, crossing into a very different territory. Neil's obsession was beyond psychological. It was deeply sexual in nature. He suffered from apotemnophilia, a form of BID condition where a person derives intense sexual gratification and pleasure from the idea of being an amputee and having their own limbs removed. When you mix a deep identity mismatch with a powerful sexual fetish, you get an unstoppable obsession. Neil was so obsessed that he spent years performing amputations on patients while secretly dreaming of having his own legs cut off. If Neil Hopper had frozen his legs solely because of his psychological struggles, this would be a tragic and bizarre medical case. But Neil did not stop at self-mutilation. He decided to turn his missing limbs into a massive source of personal wealth, driven by pure greed. After his legs were amputated in May 2019, Neil filed critical illness claims with two major insurance providers, Aviva and Old Mutual Wealth. These insurance policies are designed to pay out a massive lump sum of cash if you suffer a sudden, life-changing medical disaster like cancer, a stroke, or severe sepsis. Neil lied to both companies. He declared that his bilateral amputations were the tragic, organic result of natural sepsis from his camping trip, completely concealing the fact that he had deliberately frozen his feet in dry ice. And because Neil was a highly respected consultant vascular surgeon, his claims had an immediate, high level of credibility. Insurance companies do not typically suspect that a top-tier surgeon would freeze his own legs, which is probably why his claims were honored. His scheme worked perfectly. Neil successfully extracted a massive fortune from the insurers. In total, Neil pocketed nearly £500,000, or almost $600,000 in fraudulent cash. Neil wasted no time spending his stolen wealth. He used it to fund a luxurious lifestyle and high-end home upgrades, including $300,000 worth of major building works and home renovations and a fancy camper van. To his friends and neighbors, Neil looked like a brave, resilient man who was using his insurance money to adapt his home and lifestyle for his new disability. But in reality, he was using stolen cash to fund his dream life. Neil was so pleased with his plan that he even sent a text message to a close friend about the insurance claims, writing, "We should milk this as much as possible." But the Bionic Surgeon's beautiful house of cards finally collapsed in March 2023 when police knocked on his door and arrested him. He was immediately suspended from working as a doctor.
Within just weeks of this documentary airing, Neil was suspended from his job at the Royal Cornwall Hospital NHS Trust. Restrictions were placed on his practice by the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service.
On September 4, 2025, Neil Hopper stood before Judge James Adkin at Truro Crown Court to receive his punishment. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of fraud by false representation and 3 counts of possessing extreme pornographic images. The prosecutor, Nicholas Lee, told the court that Neil's actions were driven by a highly disturbing combination of obsession with removing parts of his own body, sexual interest in doing so, and greed. The prosecution also revealed that by purchasing extreme videos from the EunuchMaker website, Neil's money and online activity had encouraged Marius Gustavson to remove body parts of third parties, linking Neil directly to a broader criminal ring. Judge James Adkin was incredibly harsh in his sentencing remarks. He described Neil's actions as deliberate and calculated, and sentenced him to 2 years and 8 months in prison. But his punishment was not over. The judge gave Neil a strict 10-year sexual harm prevention order to stop him from doing certain bad things. The court also started a plan to get back the £466,000 Neil had stolen, which most likely means his family's house might have to be sold. Neil's personal life was completely ruined. His wife, Rachel, felt deeply betrayed and immediately initiated divorce proceedings. His medical career, basically over. The General Medical Council formally struck Neil off the medical register, declaring him unfit to ever practice medicine again. Neil reportedly wept as he was led away to his prison cell, realizing he had lost everything. While Neil Hopper's personal life was ruined, The true nightmare of this case belongs to his former patients. From 2013 to 2023, Neil's work as a consultant vascular surgeon meant he performed hundreds of lower limb amputations on real patients. And once the public learned that Neil had a severe sexual fetish linked to amputations and body modifications, a massive wave of fear swept through Cornwall. Former patients have most likely started asking themselves a highly disturbing question. If my surgeon got sexual pleasure from amputating limbs and enjoyed watching people in pain, did he cut off my leg because I actually needed to, or did he do it to satisfy his own sick fetish? Lawyers have stated that this case highlights a critical dilemma, that a doctor's personal dark desires spilled over into their professional life, completely clouding their clinical judgment. Dozens of shocked and terrified former patients have contacted Enable Law, a leading medical negligence law firm based in the Southwest. Mike Bird, a partner at Enable Law who's leading a team of solicitors to support these patients, stated that the case has caused shock and grave concern. Some have had life-changing surgery and are now worried that it was not really needed, Mr. Bird said. The hospital trust that employed Neil, the Royal Cornwall Hospital's NHS trust, released a statement trying to reassure the public. They claimed that their exhaustive investigations and clinical reviews, which included engaging an experienced independent clinical expert to review Neil's decisions to operate, found no evidence whatsoever to indicate any risk or harm to patients at our hospitals. But patient advocates and lawyers are not satisfied. Lawyers argue the review has not been public or transparent enough and conducted behind closed doors. Former patients who have come forward said they were never even consulted as part of the hospital's review. Even worse, Neil Hopper also operated a highly busy private clinical practice at the Duchy Hospital, a private healthcare facility in Cornwall. So far, no review of his private practice and his patients there had been mentioned. The legal battle over Neil Hopper's medical decisions is only just beginning, and it could cost the NHS millions of pounds. In the UK, there's a helpful rule called the date of knowledge. Usually, if a doctor makes a mistake, you only have 3 years to tell a judge and ask for help. But the law knows that sometimes you don't find out about a mistake until much later. This rule means the 3-year timer doesn't start on the day of the surgery. Instead, it starts on the day you first find out that the doctor did something wrong. Some former patients may still be able to bring claims if their date of knowledge is treated as starting when they learned about the concern, but that would depend on the facts of each case. Body integrity dysphoria is a very real, painful psychological condition, and those who suffer from it deserve real help and support. But Neil Hopper chose to handle his struggle through extreme self-injury, massive financial fraud, and a massive web of lies that betrayed his family, his colleagues, and the patients who trusted him with their lives. Neil got exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be a double amputee, and now he is one. But he also got exactly what he deserved for all his lies. A prison sentence, a ruined reputation, and the loss of everyone who ever cared about him. The man traded a beautiful life in Cornwall for fake legs and a prison cell. Now, if you want to see more surprising health news and shocking health stories, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.